What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, we're going to discuss the best cheap defenders. And for the purposes of this video, that is going to be any defender 4.5 million or below. We will discuss 5 million up and premium defenders at some point, but there's so many 4.5s to go with. A lot of you are probably looking at them. I want to discuss and go through as many of the options and as many of the teams that have 4.5 million defenders as possible. So if you enjoy this video, please do give it a like. Hit that subscribe button if you're new around here, and let's jump into it. So before we get into individual teams and players, I wanted to talk about the defensive numbers from last season. Every team you see here has a 4.5 million defender that is potentially an option. The only sides that have got 4.5 million defenders that I've not put on the screen are Spurs, Man United and Liverpool, because I just think you probably have to spend at least 5 million for those teams. And I've also not included the promoted teams. Obviously, we don't have their numbers from the Premier League last year, but more to the point, promoted teams tend to concede quite a few goals. Not always, right? Brentford had a pretty good season last year, but they tend to. And because there's so many other teams that have 4.5 million defenders, I don't think we need to be targeting promoted teams from the start. So I have left them out. Now, I know expected goal numbers are not necessarily perfect, but they're one of the best predictors that we've got, which is why I've put them on screen. You can always add your own context, right? Crystal Palace won't have Gallagher this year. Leeds have got Marsh right from the start. He's going to have a full pre-season with them. Leicester will hopefully have less defender issues or defender injuries. Everton have bought Tarkowski. Maybe that will help. There's lots of stuff to kind of think about when you look at these defensive numbers, but this is the order from best to worst in terms of expected goals conceded last year. So I've had to triple check Crystal Palace numbers, but they were, in terms of expected goals conceded, and I know this is going to sound crazy, but they were as good as Liverpool last year. Now, I don't expect them to repeat that this year, and obviously I do expect Liverpool to concede less goals, but Crystal Palace are definitely not a pushover. Brighton always do really well. Same for Arsenal, then it's Villa, then it's Brentford, and obviously it gets worse and worse and worse. Now, for the purposes of this video, I have left some other teams out from talking about their players, because I just think Leeds and Southampton defensive numbers were so poor, I just don't want to include them. Similarly, for Everton, I just wouldn't go there. I'd need a lot of convincing that they're going to improve, and I don't know if Tarkowski is enough, to be honest. For Wolves, if Semedo was fit for the start of the season, we could see Aït-Nouri and Johnny battling it out for the other. So, you know, Johnny can play left or right, but there's maybe rotation concerns there. If one of them starts a lot of games in pre-season, especially, you know, you want to look at the kind of final game of pre-season and maybe the one just before. If one of them is starting quite regularly, they could be an option at 4.5. Johnny in particular is very attacking, but we need to see a bit more before we discuss them any further. And for Newcastle and Villa, they've got 4.5 million options. So Newcastle got Burn, Botman, Villa have got Mings as well. But I just think if you target those teams, you should probably try and get up to like a Trippier or a Luka Dean or a Matt Cash or someone like that. So that's why I've not included them for this video. The only other thing I would say really quickly, if I just bring up this draft here, is we can look at fixtures for a defender, but one of the things that will matter quite a lot is when you want to play them, because not everyone plays their 4.5 million defender every single week. So for example, with Neto, you might have him in your team, but against Spurs away, you don't necessarily want to play him. So if you had a 4.5 million defender on the bench, you want one with a good fixture in game week 3. So you could then look down the list, think, okay, well, West Ham have got Brighton at home. Maybe I'll target one of theirs. Arsenal have got Bournemouth away. That could be an option. Leicester against Southampton at home. And then you can try and look at when else you might need them and just try and get the team and the player who has the best fixtures to fit when you don't want to play your first 11. So that's one thing to consider. Obviously, if you're playing them all the time, then fixtures for the whole stretch matter a lot more. But just take that into account when you're trying to decide which 4.5. So we'll start off with Brighton, who always seem, at least over the last couple of seasons, to have pretty good defensive numbers. I know they're a bit of a meme when it comes to expected goals conceded. The numbers underlying always look good. Doesn't necessarily translate into clean sheet points. And one thing that slightly worries me about Brighton is that they have lost Bissouma. Obviously, like losing one player or gaining one player doesn't necessarily make a huge amount of difference, because teams are well drilled in the tactics. They can bring someone else to play that position, etc. But I think Bissouma could have a little bit of an effect on how Brighton perform this year, but we'll have to wait and see for that. One thing I really like about Lamptey, apart from playing in a pretty consistent side, is his underlying numbers are pretty good. So 0.05 XG, 0.13 expected assists. There aren't many, if any. I don't think I found one from the teams I'm looking at now with better attacking numbers at 4.5 million. There's better attacking defenders, Trent, James, Chilwell, etc., but not for 4.5 million. So that's one of the reasons I really like Lamptey. The biggest issue with him is he had a big injury, and last year he was managed quite a lot. He wasn't necessarily playing week in, week out. My hope would be that with him at least coming back and playing some minutes and having a pre-season, he'll be good to go from game week 1. One of the other issues with kind of Brighton is their fixtures just aren't great though to start the season. So although Man United were poor last year in terms of expected goal numbers, they were kind of right up there. They're not like Liverpool, Chelsea, Spurs, Man City, etc., but they're just behind that. So them and Leicester, although their defences were poor last year, the attack wasn't too bad. So you could see them scoring. Then they got Leeds and West Ham in the middle. So the best fixtures are probably Newcastle at home and Fulham away. So again, if you don't need to play him all the time, that's fine. But if you're going to have to play him like 2-3 times in the first 6, that might not be great, especially if we're not fully convinced about his fitness. So if you wanted a Brighton defender, I think Lamptey is the fun and exciting pick that can probably get you an attack and return. But the safer pick, who's probably a little bit better in terms of the fitness department and nailed on start every single game, is probably Lewis Dunk. But I do generally quite like Brighton defence. So we've got to talk about Arsenal. I do think they are the team that most people are looking at having a 4.5 million defender from, and I probably wouldn't argue against it that strongly. So we are recording this video quite early, but right now, if I had to pick a 4.5 million defender, it probably would be an Arsenal one, and probably Tomiyasu. Now, they do have Ben White as well, and on day one of price reveals, people got quite excited because I think a lot of us thought they were coming in at 5 million or above, and they didn't, right? They were 4.5. Now, I've seen some Arsenal, some non-Arsenal fans speculate that Ben White's place is not absolutely nailed. And I kind of get it because Saliba's there now. Apparently they're trying to sign another centre-back as well. That could be for European reasons. They weren't in Europe last year. They are this year. I just think that, I don't know, as a non-Arsenal fan, I feel like watching them last year, Gabriel and Ben White had a pretty good partnership. I don't know why that would just get broken up suddenly because Saliba's back in the squad. I don't know. I feel like Ben White starts the season, but I guess because they are trying to buy another centre-back, because they've got Saliba back, maybe that puts enough question marks over his place, where with Tomiyasu, you just don't get that. Unlike Lamptey, not quite as attacking, and I do think from an Arsenal point of view, he will be held back quite a bit so that Tierney can attack. So Tomiyasu almost makes like a 3, and Tierney's the one that gets forward because he is the better attacking fullback. But I think for 4.5 million in one of the best defences that have got a 4.5 million defender that's an option, with expected goals conceded 1.12 like Brighton, Tomiyasu probably is the go-to right now. And I think there's quite a few fixtures there. Although Crystal Palace defence was good last year, the attack wasn't as good. So Palace, Bournemouth, Fulham, Villa, I don't think you really mind playing him in any of those games. And if you need him in one of the other ones, again, you just want that kind of player from that better defence. So Tomiyasu looks good. And unless something major happens, I think he'll be extremely popular in game week 1. So Crystal Palace is definitely a side that intrigues me, especially from a defensive point of view, because their prices are so cheap. And those expected goal numbers, like I said earlier, that 1, which is exactly the same as Liverpool on a per 90 basis, is pretty impressive. And again, I'm not saying they're as good as Liverpool because they're clearly not. But if they could keep up anywhere near that amount, they will be good budget options for us throughout the season. And again, you might not want to go for a defender necessarily. You could spend 4.5 on the keeper. But in this one, we are going to stick to mostly defenders. The thing is, I don't know if they can keep that up necessarily. I don't know how big a miss that Gallagher will be. The fixtures kind of save us from worrying about it too much. That's one thing with the fixtures this season. All the top teams that we want to target have pretty good fixtures, and a lot of the teams like Crystal Palace just don't. So we don't really need to worry, right? You're not necessarily going to want to play a defender against Arsenal or Liverpool or Man City. And the way the season's going to go, a lot of people are going to wildcard early. We're going to see a lot of wildcards between kind of game week 5 and 8. Because of the World Cup, there's no real reason to save it any later. And that doesn't mean we need to do anything different with our game week 1 squads, but it does mean if you're looking at a Crystal Palace defender thinking, well, from game week 5, they're pretty good, lots of things can happen in that first 4 game weeks, and you might be stuck with someone you don't really want. So Anderson, not that bad for bonus points. Gay might be slightly better goal threat. There's not really a hell of a lot in it. But ultimately, I just think the fixtures save us. We can wait and see. Will they be as good as last year? If they are, we might pick up some of their players on an early wildcard. So I quite like the look of a Brentford defender if you can get past the first 2 games. I wouldn't really want to play one of my 4.5s against Leicester or Man United. Now, their expected goals conceded are not quite as good as the teams we've seen so far in Crystal Palace, but they have got pretty poor fixtures, and obviously then there was Arsenal and Brighton as well. But the fixtures from game week 3 onwards are not that bad for Brentford at all. So someone like Janssen, bit of goal threat, could be a decent option. I would also think about combinations as well. And this is all going to depend on how you're putting your squad together. But here's just an example to think about, and this can apply to other teams. Don't worry too much about exactly who's in the team right now, but I've got nothing in the bank for this draft, and I've got Ederson in goal because he is cheaper than Laporte and Diaz, right? So he's cheaper than them by 0.5 million. So I've gone for him to cover that Man City defence alongside Cancelo, and I've got Janssen in there as well. Now I could potentially just have Raya in goal, and there's going to be a lot of that, right? Sometimes when you're looking at a 4.5 million defender, there is going to be a goalkeeper alternative. But then I've only got 1 million to spend. And obviously for 5.5 million, I can't get either of those 2 Man City defenders that I just spoke about, right? So I'd have to shave off 0.5 million. So potentially, if you've got a kind of more premium defender in your team with a cheap goalkeeper, it might be better just to flip that around if you need a little bit more money to spend. Whether or not that's a good idea is going to depend on a case-by-case basis, right? I think for Ederson, blocking off one of the Man City spots is not actually that bad of a thing. And again, given a potential for an early wild card, if you need Janssen for game week 3, even 4 and 5, I don't think you'd be that bad off having to play him all of those. That would be okay. And if Ederson is not providing good value, if City don't get too many clean sheets, you get rid of him on your wild card anyway. So that's something to think about, because a lot of people are looking at Raya. Depending on which defenders you look at, there might be a slightly better combination to go for the Brentford defender instead of goalkeeper. It's really going to depend on a case-by-case basis. So West Ham actually have quite a lot of 4.5 million defenders, which I was a little bit surprised at. I thought most of them would be 5 million or above, because I do rate West Ham as a pretty good defensive team. And it's quite interesting because their expected goals conceded is 1.22. So it's slightly worse than most of the teams we've spoken about so far. But I'm not a complete slave to the numbers when it comes to FPL thing. And I know some people think I am, but I'm not. And if you said to me, which defence would you prefer to back? West Ham or Brentford? West Ham or Palace? West Ham or Brighton? Maybe not Arsenal, by the way, but I'd probably choose West Ham in most of those cases, because I feel like they're a well-drilled and well-organised team under David Moyes. As long as they keep Rice, that is going to continue. They also did have some defender issues, or I keep saying issues, defender injuries last year as well. So I think that 1.22 is a number that can definitely be improved. And if I had to play a West Ham defender against Nottingham Forest, Brighton and Aston Villa, it wouldn't really put me off too much. Obviously, the other fixtures you see there for the opening 6 are not great, and if you've got to play this defender regularly, it's not ideal. But game week 2 to 4 is pretty good for West Ham. It's not bad anyway. I wouldn't worry about having to play a West Ham defender there. I do wonder if there's some slight question marks about exactly who is going to be nailed going into the season. So if you look at the list of players they've got, Cresswell is 5. He's usually quite attacking, sometimes good for bonus as well. Fair enough. Dawson is 5 because of his goal threat for sure. And Aguard, I think, for 5 million is probably because FPL expect him to be nailed on. So the question is, who's the first choice centre-back partnership going to be? I would assume it's Aguard and Zuma. Right, but if they're all fit, I just don't really know right now. If you're a West Ham fan, by the way, or if you're a fan of any of the teams I've spoken about and you think I've got something slightly wrong, put it in the comments. I'll happily highlight it, have a conversation. But I think there's maybe some question marks over who the first choice centre-backs are. At left-back, it probably is Cresswell over someone like Masuaku. I'd say that's probably going to happen, although Johnson did play at left-back at times last year, but I don't expect that to happen when Cresswell is fit necessarily. So then it's at right-back, it's Sofal versus Johnson. Now, there was a time last year where Johnson came in and Moyes said something like it's his place to lose, and Sofal was out for a while, then he was on the bench for a couple of games, but after that he did just win his place back. So I'd be very surprised if he doesn't go into this season as the first choice right back. But a lot of West Ham fans rate Johnson. A lot of West Ham fans will tell you that Moyes rates Johnson as well. So I don't know if it's completely clear cut. But again, if we get that answer during pre-season, it looks to be Sofal. You don't need him for Man City. I would back that expected goals number to improve, and I think those fixtures between 2 and 4 are pretty good. And Sofal's not a bad attacking defender either. Maybe not quite as good as Lamptey, but he's up there in terms of assist threat, if not goal threat. I don't know what it is, but something is drawing me into Leicester defenders. It probably is just the price, to be fair, because in the past, we've seen the likes of Castagna, Ricardo Pereira, like 5.5. I think Ricardo Pereira was even 6 million at one point, just because of how good he is in attack. And Leicester defence used to be a bit better. Now, last year it was poor, right? They became a team that you were not afraid to have your attacker play against. You wouldn't necessarily go out of your way to target them, like a Norwich, for example. But they were good to play against, right? Because they were conceding so many chances. Part of that was huge defender injuries, even worse than West Ham, I would say. Like, Evans missed large chunks of the season. Fofana missed, like, not the whole season, but near enough. Castagna didn't make all the games. Ricardo Pereira was being managed, was out with injuries at the times. And so was James Justin as well. So I do expect some improvement, like I expect West Ham's numbers to improve as well. Whether or not it will go from 1.43 expected goals conceded, which is pretty poor, to a good standard, I'm not sure. But for 4.5 million, it may be worth the risk, especially when you look at like Pereira, maybe Castagna, who aren't that bad when it comes to attacking as well. The problem is, I've just named all their defenders, right? I do suspect that Fofana and Evans without transfers are probably the first choice centre-backs. But at fullback, it's a little bit more difficult. Like Ricardo Pereira, like I said, was kind of in and out of the team a lot last year because of injuries and being managed and stuff like that as well. But he is pretty good. So I don't expect him to get left out all the time, even if Justin and Castagna start the season. Whereas with Sofao, for example, at West Ham, if he was looking first choice in pre-season, I suspect it would be his place to lose. Whereas with Leicester, let's say Castagna and James Justin look like they're going to start the season, we could easily see Pereira start at some point, because even if Castagna was playing left back and Justin was playing right back, Pereira could play right back and Justin could just go and play left back for one game, right? So that is the main problem with Leicester. And again, maybe the fixtures save us a little bit from having to try and figure this out, because unless you desperately want them for Brentford and Southampton, there's not too much to go on in the opening 5 fixtures. So again, for better defences and you know, steady starts and stuff like that, there probably are better teams. But at some point, I feel like I'm going to have a Leicester defender in my team because they just feel too cheap. But for game week 1, probably not. Unless there's an injury, right? If Castagna or like another injury, if Castagna, Pereira, or James Justin, etc., get injured, that probably leaves the space open for one of them to kind of, or two of them to play quite regularly. Although there's Thomas as well for left back, so it is a bit of a minefield. But yeah, I don't think so for game week 1. So there we go, that's my thoughts on the cheap defenders, 4.5 million or below. I know we're likely to have some £4 million playing defenders by the time game week 1 starts. I do think there's so much value in the 4.5 million defenders. You'd have to have a real good reason to go for one of the £4 million ones, because if I was going to have someone coming off my bench, an Arsenal defender, a Brighton defender, or a West Ham defender for 4.5 is probably pretty good value. So right now, Tomiyasu is looking good. I really like the look of Sofao as well. And if Lamptey proves his fitness during pre-season, he is extremely exciting. It's a bit of a meme in the FPL community. Lively Lamptey. He always looks like he's going to get you an attacking return, but he's got a lot of potential for 4.5 million. And I think if you could guarantee me he was going to be fit, right, and be able to last like at least the first 6 to 8 games, you could even argue he's probably worth 5 million. So that's why the 4.5 million price is so enticing. But let me know below who you're thinking going for. Are any of you looking to go for more than one 4.5 million defender? You're sacking off this premium defender rubbish and you're putting at least 2 in your team. Let me know below. If you have enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, keep supporting the channel, hit that subscribe button. Let's get 300k before game week 1, and I'll catch you again tomorrow for another video.